Hello and welcome once again to How to Do Everything, the complete guide to the human experience. I am your host, the inventor of podcasting, Tommy Dasilo, and today on the show, Des Bishop is going to teach me how to fit in absolutely anywhere. This show is on Patreon. We are listener supported, so if you enjoy what you hear, you can get some bonus episodes right now by heading to patreon.com/howtodoeverything. There's a bunch on there. There's me doing a monthly fake radio show where I play music and chat in between songs. There's me chatting a little bit more with some guests that have been on the show. And then there are a bunch of great episodes with guests that I've recorded specifically for the Patreon. Last week I had Eloise Eftos and Ben Searle on. This week you're going to hear the first of a two-part episode with Nikki Britton and Danielle Walker, who've both been on the show before, but they were both in town, so I thought, why not get them together? It's a lot of fun. It's a very loose, silly vibe, and I think you'll enjoy it. So get onto patreon.com/howtodoeverything. But today on the show, Des Bishop, the legendary Des Bishop, Irish-American comedian. You might have seen some of his TV shows that he made in Ireland. You might have seen him online. He's got tons of followers. He's got a special out. He's been out to Australia a bunch of times. I know him reasonably well through him being on the Little Dum Dum Club back in the day. And so I thought he'd be good to get on because he's a guy who has lived a million lives, as we will hear about in this episode. So let's get into it. This is How to Do Everything with the great Des Bishop. I don't know, in terms of the show being called How to Do Everything and about learning how to do different things and expand your skill set, you are a guy that I really think of as having done that in so many different ways, certainly professionally. So much of your work has been putting yourself in a situation where you're taking on a new language, you're learning all these different new skill sets. I was just boning up on the history of Des Bishop last night, and it's it feels like you've lived about 18 different lives.
Yeah, I mean, I really could have just written some jokes and saved myself a lot of hassle, but I can't actually. Sometimes I look back because I haven't done any of those immersion things for a decade now. Mm-hmm. But so when I look back, I'm like, wow, that's mad, because it just kind of happened accidentally. The first one, the minimum wage one, and then that just became my thing. I put myself in tough situations and make TV shows about them. But the good news, whatever about the TV part and my career, the good news was I really did learn a lot. You can't, no matter whether the shows did well or not, you can't take away the experiences, Yeah.
So let's start there, just for people who aren't familiar. So one of your big breakout things was in Ireland, right? You did a TV show that was you doing all these different minimum wage jobs.
I mean, that was the breakout. I mean, I was a comedian since 97, but that show filmed in 2003, but was on TV in 2004, and was a life changer. Yeah, right. Not the minimum wage part, because by the way, I really did those jobs for a month each, over 4 months. But actually, the bigger issue, the wage stuff was real, but actually Ireland and the world, I feel was kind of a touch more affordable back then. It's funny looking back now. It would have been a very hard series to make these days, just because the cost of living is so high. Yeah. Not even making a political statement, just like a statement of fact that a lot of the things that I pulled off in that series would just not be doable today. But the bigger thing that made it, I think, a big series in Ireland was because Ireland was just starting to have immigration for literally the first time in its history. And I showed the way that those workers were being treated. Right. And not everyone in Ireland loved seeing that, but it certainly made for pretty riveting television, particularly the first episode, which was late night kebab shop called Abracababra. And you're seeing that sort of, fucking the Australian equivalent of, people coming in on Swanson Street,
good memory.
At 2 a.m, not showing their best selves. And
I have a feeling that almost every city on earth has a kebab shop called Abracababra. I reckon I've seen that maybe 8 or 9 times across my life. It's
it's a chain in Ireland.
Is it really? Okay, right.
Yeah. It's a proper. It's a proper. Every town in Ireland has an abracadabra.
Okay, right.
And it was chaos. You know, the Irish pubs all close at a certain time, and they would pour in quite drunk. And listen, it was fun. And I don't like. Obviously, some people were drunk and they were being dicks, but I don't really like. I don't like the fact that people are like, oh, you showed us in a bad light. It's just like, listen, man, like I would never have any resentments against any of these people. These are just like the crazy things you do when you're drunk. And it was just like, it was just fun to show it. It was fun to experience it for me, you know? I mean, I was early in my comedy career. It wasn't like I'm a rich dude that's suddenly doing a minimum wage job. I mean, I was making a living doing stand-up, but I wasn't like, you know, it wasn't that much of a stretch to suddenly have to live on €6.35 an hour, which was the rate at the time.
Well, you got the weird split too, where you're doing stand up, and so you're doing this like minimum wage job, but you're also doing it for like a new TV thing. So like when you're early on in your stand up career, you're like, yeah, whatever, I'll do this weird thing for a show, whatever. Who knows what might stick?
But also, that's why you truly can't understand how people that are stuck in that, like, so say like an immigrant, like I worked with a lot of Chinese people, which in so many ways, my relationship with the Chinese people that I worked with in Abracadabra changed my life immensely, which we'll get into long term. But in the short term, those Chinese people that I worked with, I could never truly understand because they didn't have a choice. Whereas for me, it was always a 1 month. And I was doing it for a greater end for myself. So as much as I could try to experience it and feel the pressure financially and feel the humiliation of having drunken people treat you like shit, it was still like, oh, I can take this now because I'm actually making a TV show, which is actually quite, you know, there's an exclusivity to that, or there's a sense of like worth in the fact that I'm doing this quite impressive thing. So you could never truly say like, oh, I really felt the pain, but you know, you could try to experience it enough that you could tell a good story in a funny but effective way. Because at the end of the day, we were still trying to be funny, but in the kind of a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down kind of a way. We weren't trying to be overly flippant about what people were experiencing.
You don't have to have fully experienced it, but certainly like at the end of the day, as long as you just like understand it a little bit better, right? That's all anyone really like.
Yeah, and I think the other skill. Yeah, and the other thing that I guess I'm good at naturally, because I always lived in like other people's houses. You know, like I went to Ireland when I was 14. I was like living in strangers' houses. I'm good at like fitting in places, but also I was good at connecting with these people, so they trusted me enough to like let themselves like be honestly shown, but not in a way that was like, oh, we're exploiting you. It was in a way that like people could connect with them, and then the viewer could go, oh, I feel for these people because they're quite funny. And, you know, I probably didn't humanize them when I was standing at a counter. You know, you're standing at a counter and you're like shouting your taco fries order. You're probably not really humanizing the people. So, you know, it was a good way for them, you know, so they could show themselves honestly. I'm having this like kind of fake experience, but they were having a real experience. And they all came across really well, which is part of what made the series great.
Yeah, what was your favorite of the minimum wage jobs that you
jobs?
did?
None of them were great, but honestly, the fourth job was in a supermarket called Super Quinn, and honestly, they treated us pretty well there, and they sort of like they gave you the opportunity to advance, and you know, you felt like, you know, to a degree that you could have a good career there and a nice life, and you know, the camaraderie there was actually quite positive. So I would say that was the best job, but in terms of the best. You know,
the one that you would like if you had to like stick with one of them, like if it had been one of those like brutal reality shows where there's like a prank being pulled on you, where at the end of it it's like you're not allowed to do stand up anymore, you now have to pick one of these jobs to do for the rest of your life.
I would work in a supermarket for sure. That was the most reason. It was like retail, you know, I don't know, it just felt like somewhat normal. The hardest was the hotel, but that's because I was living in Dublin. That was just the loneliness of the city, and tough. That was tough to live on the money, and yeah, that was not a fun job. I felt that was the only one where I truly felt like a little bit of the depression of like really having no choice but to do these jobs. But obviously, a lot of the people that were coming mostly from Eastern Europe in that job, like they just had like a motivation that I think trumps a lot of your feelings. You know, they were like working that job plus another job, and they just had this motivation of sending money home. And, you know,
Right.
so I think when you have the motivation, maybe it makes it a little, maybe a little easier. But for me, I thought, God, if I had to do this, I would be seriously depressed. That was a toughie.
Yeah, you're totally right that like it would be hard to make a series like that now, but also I feel like people think about this stuff more than ever. Like in terms of like it's kind of such an ahead of its time idea. Like I feel like people are like broadly a lot more aware about the minimum wage that a lot of people are living on, and like that's
Yes.
like so much social media chatter is about like the haves and the have-nots. But you're right, it would be hard to make that show now, but it's also, weirdly so in line with everyone's thinking at the moment in terms of just like, things like healthcare and things of just like, like I've been having some health stuff on and off for a bit, and I get so like frustrated at how long it can take and how expensive the doctor's appointments are and all this stuff, where I go and I'm finding it like infuriating and almost impossible, and I'm like in a good position. Like I can afford the appointments. I have a flexible schedule, and I just get so depressed about like anyone who doesn't have like the luxury of those things and like needing this kind of care. It's like it's like I don't think it used to be a thing that you could like opt in on thinking about, and now it's just like it's inescapable. It's just around you constantly.
Yes, and it's times 1,000 in the States.
Yeah,
I mean, like
I'll bet
in the States, like forget it, But the other thing about that show was it was really at the dawn of social media, and I don't. We made it very honestly. Well, first of all, I don't think any company would let us in today just because like social media can be so cruel. I think they would be so concerned about the backlash that they wouldn't have let us in, because we had permission to film in all those jobs, which honestly, I think they were out of their minds, but none of them really came off that bad. But I don't think we would have got the access in today's day and age. But I also, I think we were just very honest, and we really weren't sensational. I feel like today there's such a desire for the sensationalized story. I think there would be more pressure to, make it more dramatic. I think in today's
people love the misery porn kind of side of things.
Yeah.
Like they'd really want to see you meeting someone who's just having the worst life imaginable, and like
yes,
yeah.
But anyway, glad that I made it, and it did change my life. But it also, because it was just a random suggestion from a woman that had just started working on Irish TV. Because I had read the book Nickel and Dime by Barbara Ehrenreich, and she had said, "Oh, have you read that book?" I was like, "I have actually," but she was undercover, this American journalist, and worked shitty American minimum wage jobs, but undercover for a print book. So I was aware of the concept. But anyway, needless to say, it wasn't my idea. The idea was given to me. However, that sort of format of having an experience and then filming it, but also doing stand-up about it, and the stand-up being part of the show, that became then my formula for, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think four series after that.
You've had so many experiences that for most people would be like, so, I remember kind of bonding with you over like, and we, at different points of our lives and different forms of it, but you and I have both had and survived cancer. And, for me, that's like the only interesting thing that's ever happened in my life. Like I'll be dining, I'm done. And that happened when I was like 11. So I'm just checked out now. But you have that, you do that, and then you're like, time to go learn a new language. Time to go learn Chinese.
I did do so. I was a stand-up when I got cancer, so I did do jokes about that. But I never did like a full cancer show.
Yeah, you never
anything.
went deep on it.
But I enjoyed those, and I wrote a lot of the jokes. The jokes that I have about testicular cancer, I wrote a lot of them while I was still in the hospital. That was just the way comedians, you just think about those things. But after numerous experiences of documentaries and also learning the Irish language, the Chinese thing finally happened in 2013. But from 2008 to 2013, I was trying to get that off the ground.
Yeah,
So-
and what was the motivation for that? What was it about specifically China and that language? Just the fact that just the challenge?
Well, there's like loads of reasons. The So I might as well give the full version. So when we were kids in New York, every Saturday afternoon, there was Kung Fu movies on Channel 5. It was just like a thing. And like, I don't know if you ever pay attention to like 80s American comics, but a lot of them do jokes about like the badly dubbed Kung Fu movies.
Yep.
Like even in Police Academy, he does the Michael Winslow does the dubbed voice joke, like the mouth is moving. But that's because we all watched Kung Fu movies when we were kids. And I never lost my obsession with Kung Fu movies as a result of that.
Right.
So I always had a fascination with Kung Fu movies. That's one tiny thing. But then when I was in like, I don't know, my mid-20s, I started doing Kung Fu with the actual Hong Kong Shifu in Ireland.
Right.
And he was fascinating. But he used to take us to have like proper Chinese food every Sunday after training. And we would sit down like as a group and like he would like show us like proper Chinese eating culture. And I started to have like a desire then to like learn more about Chinese culture. Now, on top of that, coinciding all that time in my life, the neighborhood I grew up with in New York, Flushing, Queens, became completely Chinese in my lifetime.
Right.
So it went from like, a sort of white, Italian, Irish, German immigrant kind of enclave to 100% Chinese, to the point where today you'll hardly hear anything but Mandarin in various different forms.
Was the nanny big over there? Is that why they all moved in?
The Australians always bring up the nanny. It's amazing how big the nanny was in Australia.
It's huge. There's a channel now that's I just discovered this the other day. There's a digital channel here that's just playing the nanny 24/7. And my fiance loves it. So she's just she's just watching the nanny. Like anytime I come home, she's got the nanny on.
Fran Dresser now runs SAG. She was the one that was like the head of the SAG strike,
Oh, sure. Sure.
Anyway, so Fran Drescher, she's Jewish, but she represents more like what Flushing used to be, like white with that strong New York accent. Like my mother and her sound very similar, and I still have like a strong New York accent because that's what Flushing, Queens was. Anyway, as you know, I moved to Ireland when I was 14, but my family were still in New York. So I would come back and like our neighbors became Chinese. And then like sometimes like if I was back and it was like a snow day, so you'd be out shoveling because you have to. That's a civil responsibility. It's the law. You have to. You're responsible for shoveling your street. So then I'd be like out shoveling with the Chinese, but they don't speak English, and I would like struggle to communicate. And I did start to get like a desire to learn Mandarin. And then I worked in Abracadabra with all these Chinese, and they were Chinese immigrants. But we bonded on my love for Kung Fu movies. And because I had gotten back into Kung Fu movies when I started studying Kung Fu, and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon happened to come out at the same time. And Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon just opened me up to like all the Kung Fu movies that had come out from like the time of my childhood to today. I had lost touch with it. So suddenly I was like watching all the movies from Yen Wu Ping, the guy that choreographed Crouching Tiger. So suddenly I'm like really immersed in Chinese culture. I'm working with these Chinese guys. And I went to visit them when they went home for vacation in 2004. I went to visit for 6 weeks. I went to China. For 4 weeks. I went to China with my ex. And I was blown away by just how different China was. And just, really, I'd been to Thailand. I've been to places in the like in Asia, but I don't know. China just felt more like fish out of water.
Yeah.
And it wasn't always nice either. Like Thailand, largely it's just like nice and exciting. China sometimes was like a fucking challenge, And I was fascinated by it, and that was the beginning of me really saying one day I'm going to learn Mandarin. But when I had made the Irish language doc, I made this series about learning Gaelic to do stand-up in Gaelic. Then I realized, oh shit, I'm actually quite good at learning languages. I'd never really tried,
Right.
So immediately after that, I was like, now I'm going to do it for China. The Beijing Olympics was happening. in 2008, and the whole world was really focused on China, and it was always like a political, economic story. And I had been there. I had seen the humor of Chinese people. And I had my close friend, now at this stage, one of my best friends in the world, Leo, who I worked with in Kebab. He had ended up becoming the guy that would do the door for us at our comedy club in Dublin. And, so I just wanted to like do that thing, but it took us 5 years to get the funding.
Yeah, what do you think it is about that makes you this came up a few episodes ago, the idea of like learning languages, especially like as you start to get a bit older, like beyond school age, it's just it's so fucking tough, and especially for you to have done two, and especially the ones where you're also having to learn like complete other characters as well. What do you think it is? Do you have like a special system like in your brain that just makes you, more susceptible to learning them? Or
I would love to say that I have a special system, but my special system is that in both situations, I was able to take a year out of my life to totally focus on that. But it was actually my job. So it was, it wasn't like where you have a year of your life and you're getting paid. That's probably the most important thing. But you also have like a goal, like a mission, because there was a great guy called Micheál O'Fuil. He was one of my Irish language mentors. And he said that the two most important things three most important things are a good language learning environment, which is essentially total immersion, access to good learning materials, which is just like, that has gotten better and better over time because of technology. And the third thing, which I had in spades, was motivation, right? Like a goal, because I knew that at the end of my journey, no matter how well whatever, aptitude I ended up getting for the language, it was going to be on television. So I didn't want to embarrass myself.
You're going to be really harshly judged. Yeah.
And obviously I had this other... I was going to say I had this other goal, which was I had to do stand-up at the end of both of those years in those languages. So obviously that's a difficult task. So I had to really put in like a lot of work. But when you have, like when I was in school, I wasn't a good student. I had never had the motivation. I never really cared. I was just trying to get by. Whereas in these situations, like I really, really cared. So it never felt like a chore. It was actually, it's sad to say because sometimes my director would like want me to struggle more. But honestly, I just fucking loved learning, and I loved the studying, and I loved progressing, and I loved putting myself in tough situations to try to get myself better as fast as possible. So it was just a pure joy. It's actually insane that I was able to take that time out. It was just amazing. I remember
seeing every now and then I would see some of your tutoring sessions. You would get on Twitter and you would go back and forth with Ronnie Chang in Mandarin. Like
we still do that.
I think you mentioned that you were doing it or something, and then he just threw like a block of text at you to maybe like, I don't know, challenge you or verify if you were actually doing it or if you knew what you were talking about. But were you looking at people like when the pandemic kicked off and everyone all of a sudden went, I'm going to download Duolingo and learn Japanese? Were you looking at those people going, rank amateurs? Like, oh, no, now everyone's learning a language.
I was just looking at, I think it's great. I love when people try to learn a language. And I'm a fan of Duolingo. I'm a fan of Rosetta Stone. But the problem with those is that they are really good for getting you going, but it's very hard to learn without really immersing yourself. Like it is very hard. And even today where I've kept up my Mandarin level, but it's the level from 2015. I haven't really progressed because I lost a little bit of the motivation, and life happens. You get back into like an English language life, and it's hard to progress. So I have a pretty good level, and I can practice a lot. Like whenever I'm with people that speak Mandarin, I speak Mandarin, but all that does is sustain my level. It doesn't. I don't progress. So it's very hard.
I was fascinated by this. So when you were living there, you went on some Chinese dating shows?
Yeah. Well, the first one I did when I was still filming the documentary. So that actually becomes, because actually doing the Chinese dating show was a greater challenge than doing stand-up. Right. And the funny thing is that how that Chinese dating show came about was, So I was able to do stand-up in Mandarin. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying my Mandarin was great, but I was able to make Chinese people laugh quite considerably by 8 months, which was a little early. By the time I was about 10 and a half months, there's a great comedian called Joe Wang. In Mandarin, his name is Huang Xi. So he had been a pretty successful stand-up in the States, but he was a Chinese immigrant to the United States, spoke in like a very strong Chinese accent, but had moved to the States as like a researcher, doing like a PhD in Texas. But to help his English, he started going to stand-up clubs, and then he loved stand-up, and he started doing stand-up, but he did really well, and he ended up on doing Letterman, and then he ended up roasting Joe Biden at one of these, like when Joe Biden was the vice president of the United States. So as a result of a Chinese immigrant roasting Joe Biden, he went very viral in China because like the Chinese, I mean, first of all, like on so many levels, it's fucking unfathomable because the fact that you could even make fun of a leader is fascinating to Chinese people. But just to have a Chinese guy making fun, anyway, he went super viral. So viral that he ended up moving back to China because he got a TV show. So when I was in China, he was like quite famous in China. And he, similar to me, was getting his head around doing stand-up in Mandarin, right? But obviously his Mandarin is great, but his stand-up style was very much like, I am a Chinese guy in America struggling with the language. And his jokes were fucking hilarious. Like I really loved Joe Wang before I ever met him because when I started doing the process, somebody showed me these videos and I was like, wow, this guy's fucking hilarious, right? So anyway, he was getting his head around what his character was in China. Anyway, he had 5 shows in a huge venue in Shanghai, and he was like, hey, do you want to open for me? Which was huge because now we could film like a proper show with me doing Mandarin stand-up. But at that show in Shanghai, which went great, I made a joke about my mother and I going to the marriage market. So, in the parks in China, parents get together and literally like try to fucking match their daughters and sons with like other singles, right? It's a unique Chinese thing. And it got a huge laugh. And then the producer of the Shanghai-based dating show was like, do you want to do Bai Li Tiao Yi? And so of course I was like, fuck yeah, right? So the goal of doing stand-up in Chinese ends episode 5. It doesn't even end the fucking show. I'm already like doing it by the end of episode 5. Episode 6 is the last episode, and I end up on this Chinese dating show. But what's so cool about that, right, was that there's no script, right? Yeah. And that gave me my most pride. I'm not big on like, I typical sort of, I even though I'm American, I lived in Ireland most of my life, not great with the praise, but I did have a lot of pride because I went fucking toe to toe with these hosts, like in a way that was great. Like they loved it. We had so many good laughs, and it was all like improv with all the girls and their responses. Right. Like, and it was fucking funny, and it was fun for me, and it was just fascinating because now I'm on like a shiny floor Chinese dating show with a year's worth of Mandarin. Like that's cool. You can't cheat that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Was there a part of you thinking like, maybe I'll just be here forever? I mean, I've got it's all taken off here. I've got I'm doing one of my earliest gigs is at this huge theater, and then I'm getting a TV gig off the back of it. It's like when you're really young and you start when I started stand up here and there wasn't like as much of a pathway, that's kind of how you dreamt that the industry might work. You know what I mean? You're like, I'll do a few gigs and do good, and then hopefully I'll get picked up. And
yes. Well, I did think that because, well, first and foremost, by the time I'd done that dating show, I had already decided that I was going to stay in China for another year. Right. But I was going to go back to being like an international comic, but just living in Beijing. It was the first year I never left because I wanted total immersion. So like when I was in Melbourne 2014, I did the show Made in China, but I was going back to China after I did that. And so I had already decided to stay, but actually I had pitched a kind of a version of the minimum wage show to this like Western. It was like a Western-owned production company, but they were based in Shanghai. And so I wanted to do like they call like the everyday, the common man, is called a Lao Bai Xing, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of pitching it as like, oh, I'm going to struggle living on the minimum wage, it was like, I'm going to do different jobs of like the Lao Bai Xing. and try to truly become like one of the common people of China, because
Right,
you have to frame it in a kind of communist. you have to frame it in a kind of like a, one day I will wear the Mao hat and I will be one of the people.
Sure. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and CCTV9, which is the documentary channel, they actually said yes. The problem was that the budget was so minuscule that the production company had no interest, which was annoying to me because I would have done it for free.
Yeah.
So that was like a frustrating thing that never happened. But I still had that second year. But by the end of the second year, I realized that the dream that you're talking about, did you not think about staying? Not easy. China's very complicated. Very complicated.
So I went there in 2017 to do gigs in English, and the brief that you get before the first gig of like, do not under any circumstances say anything even remotely getting near the government, and me just being like, you've paid for me to come over here. You've seen my act. You know that that's not really a risk. And they're like, yeah, you'd be surprised. Just, we can't. And I was really fascinated. I was like, I'm not going to, but just out of interest, like just humor me. Let's say I get up there and I just go off. Like what would happen? And they were like, well, someone in the audience would statistically more than likely rat you and us out. Club would get raided. You would get sent home straight away. It's like, man, just like everyone that you meet there is like, people that have moved from another place, like they're so on edge at all times about what's going on.
And they got shut down in the end, the club that I think that you did. They did end up getting shut down. And also, and it wasn't because they said something bad. It was because they had a competitor who just used the system to fuck them. And that's a small example of why. And it wasn't actually, when I say I realized China's very complicated, it wasn't actually about the censorship. The censorship's a thing. It was more just about how there's a lot of corruption, and it's not a simple system, Yeah. And I realized that I was never gonna like figure it out. And there was really limited. You can blow up and go viral being the Laowai, being the white guy that can speak Chinese, and there's been a few, but you're never gonna have like a satisfying career. And I already had like a successful English language career, so it was like I'm not giving all that up to try to be the token foreigner in China. But I mean, it was great fun, and even at the end of my second year, I did like one of these New Year's shows, and I did stand up on that New Year's show, and I really I did well on that, and like at that stage, I had a girlfriend in my second year in China, so my Mandarin got pretty good, not amazing, but pretty good. So all in all, it was just like it was an amazing experience. And then that stand up that I got from my English language stand up about my time in China really, really stood to me. And like when I started doing more gigs in the States, that stuff really killed.
Yeah,
and,
right.
So all in all, like my China experience has like just given me a lot.
I did stand up about this at the time, but when I went over, I was so unprepared, and I got over there. I didn't have a SIM card. My phone didn't work. I didn't have roaming turned on. And I get there and, of course, can't get on my email, couldn't get on Messenger, like couldn't let my parents and my girlfriend at the time know that I had made it safely. So I'm there going like, how the fuck am I going to get a message back to home? And so what I ended up doing was going onto my online banking and just sending like $1 to each of those people and putting in the transaction description, just putting, I'm okay. And I felt like a fucking I was like racking my brain going, what is a service I can get on to send a message that's not going to be blocked here? Like, how am I going to send any information back home? It was
no Facebook,
insane.
No WhatsApp.
Yeah, couldn't get on anything. I just hadn't prepared. I hadn't like gotten a VPN in advance. I was just like completely stranded. It was,
but you really need, like when you're a foreigner in China, like you really need your phone, because you need to be able to show the drivers the address, because you will not be able to say it properly, So it's really quite wild to try to live in China without,
I remember being struck by how and this is 2017, how much the QR code was being used there.
Yes, they were ahead on certain things.
Yeah, before the pandemic, I remember the QR code getting wheeled out here a little bit, but it was always used for like bullshit advertising campaigns. You needed like a special app to even like open it, and it just went away so quickly. It was like sort of seen as this failed marketing thing. And then, going to China, they're using it like on, menus for paying for everything. Yes. And then going like, oh, that's cool. They figured it out. Shame we'll never get around that. And then, of course, for whatever reason, it takes a global disaster to make the Western world go, maybe there is something in these
QR codes are handy.
Codes. Yeah.
There was a few things they were ahead with the technology. They were much earlier adapters of like streaming shit on your phone. And like I remember being on the DTA, the Beijing subway, and like just everybody was watching shit on their phone in a way that was like, we just weren't doing that yet, not in the same way. And it was pretty fascinating, but that's because their TV was so censored. Their internet was like a little more open. So the young people really flocked to the internet for content earlier than we did, actually.
Sure. Yeah. So like, I'm so interested in your ability to, fit in anywhere. I think that's something that, most people would, a skill that, if they could choose, most people would love to be able to have that. And again, is that something that is like just innate in you, or is it something that you really think about when you're in a new situation? Are there certain like, parts of yourself that you're activating, or is it just something that comes completely naturally?
I mean, I think elements of it are innate in that was like, I guess my personality was such that like I was easy enough to get along with people. But part of it is like a learned skill because, when I was 14, I got sent to boarding school in Ireland. But I when I wasn't in boarding school, I was staying with cousins and friends and different things. So I really got quite good at just being like a guest,
right?
Like it became like a professional guest. And obviously, it's a big thing at 14 to be just thrust into like a totally new culture. So I figured out how to adapt in that culture. And then, I went to two different boarding schools in Ireland, and they were one was quite rural, and then one was quite like Dublin, kind of fancy, kind of like upper middle class, kind of like urban boarding school. And then I went to college in another place. So, I had a lot of different lives early in those like formative years. So then I think it just became kind of second nature for me to just like, fit into places. Yeah. And then again, like that skill suited me for those TV shows. And it's funny, you never know what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Like, did those TV shows naturally happen because I was good at that? Or did it turn out that I was, when I did the TV show, people realized, oh, he's good at that. Like, it's just like whatever, it doesn't matter. But I did end up doing a lot of things which required me to fit in.
Just be a bit of a chameleon, yeah.
Yeah, and I called one of my tours in Ireland Fitting In. Actually, my most successful tour was called Fitting In.
Right.
And it was because the second show I did was about stand-up comedy workshops in disadvantaged areas, but the jokes were largely about trying to assimilate into all these like unique situations. So like assimilation has been a kind of a recurring theme throughout my actual life and my professional life.
It's so brutal. Like it is, I think it's one of those things that, people have things that as they get older, they're like, oh, I wish I was better at this. I wish I could do this more. And definitely I think fitting in would be such a common one. And there are things that, you can go, well, you can change this about yourself. You can get better at this by doing X, Y, Z. But then as you're describing it, I think fitting in really is one of those things of like, no, you need to have had this life experience where these things happened. You know what I mean? Like you, if you feel like you're not good at it at 40, then sorry, but you're never going to have it.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, some of it's just down to your personality, right? Like,
right.
Some people are socially awkward and, like especially like with some of my friends' kids, you can see these various levels of like the spectrum. And sometimes the parents get frustrated because they want their kid to be more social. It's like, yeah, but maybe the kid's just not social. Like, what can you do, And like at the end of the day, I was always social. It was always a big part of my life to just go in and just like try to be like not the life of the party, but like to try to just be in the mix. So that's but it's pros and cons though too. Like
I want my kid to be a Des Bishop if I ever have a kid. I'm shipping him off to boarding school at age 2. I want him out there seeing the world, malleable, able to fit in anywhere.
But I know kids that like got destroyed by being thrust into those situations because it didn't suit them. And that's the thing. It's like, sometimes you get lucky and you get put in a situation that's good for you, and sometimes it's like tragic. Like Bob Geldof, the happy, whatever, the Tell Me Why I Don't Like Mondays singer, but also Live Aid organizer. But anyway, he went to the second boarding school that I went to, and he absolutely detested it, and writes about just how much of a horrible experience it was, and like he's also a successful guy. So, you just really, you never know, what situations are going to work for you and what situations aren't,
I went to the school that Barry Humphries went to, and they would always bring that up as like the great man. But like anytime he wrote about the school, he was like, this was the worst experience I ever had in my life. I fucking hated it there. Everyone there was awful to me. And they're like, see, the great man. It's like, I would bury this if I were you. Like he's not flattering about this place at all. Speaking of school, like this is a bit of an update to the homework that I give to every guest. I ask people, what's something that you're bad at? And I was talking a few episodes ago about how when I look at all the responses that I've gotten in, like they're all in the same answers page of the little survey. Yeah. There was a period where it was like literally every answer was geography. But then as of I think now you've tipped the scale where it's now 50-50 geography and maths across everyone who's been on the show, which I think says something about the type of person that I'm seeking out to be on the show. But
I think I was probably numerically dyslexic. I just really always struggled with maths. But I also I struggle with tidiness also, actually. If you're looking for something that's doesn't come up as much, I try so hard to be organized and clean, and I just always go back to my default of I'm a little bit of a slob.
Yeah, are you? Because what I'm looking at in your window is like very. You've just got the.
Well, this is just
like a grey panel behind you. What's going on in my room is that like the what people can see on camera is the like very deliberately manicured part of the room, and then outside of frame is just there's shit on that chair, there's stuff all over the floor. It's like let's just get the frame looking nice for when I put the clips up, and then everything else let's not worry about it.
Listen, man, in the modern world, all that matters is what's in the frame.
The real is all that matters.
That is a metaphor for the modern world. Your life could be falling apart, but once you look good on that iPhone, then that's all that matters.
Yep. We have you probably would have been on the project when you've been here.
Yeah, many times. Although the last time I was on, my mom had literally just died like 7 days before, and I really didn't. We decided to not talk about it, which I regret to this day. I should have just gone for the my mom just died, but the show must go on. But I didn't, and I was like doing bits. And the time before I'd really killed. About? Just boomer humor, just jokes that like.
Sure.
Just jokes that like, I was actually like iPhone addiction jokes, and it just didn't. It didn't land in a way that like still to this day, every now and then you ever have these things that you think about and you're like. You just suddenly like you could literally wince with the fucking memory.
Yeah, it's tough though because I feel like you have an equal number of things where you do what you're saying you wish you'd done. You're like, you know what? I'm just gonna be in the moment. I'm gonna be, and then if that doesn't go well, then you're like, what was I thinking? I should have played it safe. Like it was too raw. Like it's annoying because you will never know. But but like you're right. You invent this perfect scenario where you talk about your mom and it goes viral because of how honest it is and. Just like people are like, oh my God, I can't believe he just goes on and he kills it, and it's so interesting. But you can never know. You might have just had a breakdown on the show and it been really
I was
awkward.
quite manic. I was quite manic anyway. It was such a chaotic journey to Melbourne that year.
Well, I was going to say quickly about the project in terms of like what happens in the frame. They, you know, they're doing the news. They're wearing like suit jackets and ties and stuff, and then they'll regularly just post photos after the show of everyone just like wearing shorts underneath the desk. It's like
Peter Heller.
I get it. Yeah. It's like, don't show us this. Like, do it by all means, but like, you know, keep the mystique up.
What's the name of the guy? You know, Adam Hills, Miff Warhurst, and the other guy Alan Bro.
Yeah.
He never wore shoes. I did his radio show, and he's fucking there with he's barefoot.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, I didn't know that. I saw him recently. He was wearing shoes when I caught up with him recently, but
it was a radio show, and he's like barefoot. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So fucking Australian.
I got to bring this up because the last time I saw you, 2019, you were out here for the festival, you did the pod, I ran into you in the street, and then obviously pandemic happens. I hadn't seen you for a while, and I'm sitting around in lockdown with my now fiance, and she's watching one of her reality shows that she loves, and she's like, and I'm kind of in the corner of the room not really paying attention, and she's like, hey, do you know this guy? And I'm like, yeah, he's been on the pod a few times. And lo and behold, there's my friend Des Bishop shagging away on TV.
That whole experience is crazy because the good news is that I'm now married to Hannah. Yep. But the truth of that is that I met her right before she went in. I really had a feeling that like she was the one, you know, and I've had a fair few relationships in my life, but we just had a connection straight away, but we just met, you know. But what had kind of happened was like she then went in there the lockdown season, you know, where they were stuck in there, and over time throughout that thing, we had been chatting a lot. So we had sort of built up like a better connection. And, you know, I was like really on tilt, you know, the pandemic was on. I wasn't really thinking with my, you know, like with my like professional brain. In fact, I didn't tell my agent that I was going in there because I knew that they would tell me not to go. So that's how like on tilt I was, to use a poker term.
That's very apt.
I didn't want anyone to tell, because I was going in there for one reason and one reason alone, to like try to lock it down with Hannah.
I mean, it was just such a bizarre experience. Like, obviously all of that stuff going on is already like, what is happening? Everything in the world is just going completely insane.
Yes.
And then to top it off, here's this guy that you know a little bit popping up on a reality show. It was like, honestly, what is going on? Like, is this I'm having an episode? Like, it was just like.
But what's great about it for me is that we're married, which is awesome. But also for me, just in relation to the theme of this conversation, it was just like another thing that I got to experience in this life that I never would have experienced, because I'd never like had any desire to do. I did Dance with the Stars, but that was different because I always thought I would, you know, I loved learning how to dance. But I never would have had the experience of like being in that weird kind of like fly on the wall thing for those 3 days. I was literally in there for 3 days. They made a lot out of my trip, but I was in there for 3 days, and it was fun to have experience, and like all the drama that ensues with all that stuff. Like, it's really like not a big deal. They make it a big deal, but like it's really, I'm just glad that I was able to experience it, because I'm like a mature person who can go, well, I was acting like, you know, I was really like madly in love with Hannah and just doing whatever to have a laugh. They made it look as bad as possible, and it still doesn't matter to me because I had the full reality TV experience in those 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's kind of perfect, especially like, now being married to this person, it's like everyone wants the beautiful, but also kind of like funny, little bit weird story to the beginning of their relationship, right? Like, you want to be able to like tell people down the line, like, oh yeah, crazy story about how we got together. You know, I always think when in this world we're in now, and not to knock it at all, if it works for people, great, but when the story is like, oh yeah, we met on the app and went on some dates and it went really well, it's like, I don't know, it's kind of a shame to not have some like, you know, crazy story about some bizarre circumstance of, you know, running into each other 10 years later and it reconnecting or whatever. Like,
well, I never wanted to date comics. I was very anti comic dating, the pandemic, like the world was shut down. So it was like, I was following Hannah. I didn't realize, but she was following me, and I noticed she was following me, and she was near me. So that's why I reached out. But actually,
Right.
I kind of I think it's more to do with Hannah, but I have to say, like, actually dating a comic is kind of cool because you just have all these things in common.
Right.
So, I did feel that straight away on our first date. It was like, oh, this is pretty fucking cool. Like, it was so much to talk about. So it's funny.
And it's someone that gets the schedule and the demands
that
and being
part.
away
The
and stuff. Like,
the practicalities of it. The list is endless. Like, in terms of, because as I always say to people, like, for us, for a lot of people in relationships, comedians, they can feel maybe like cold or distant because they seem to put the job first because it's such a labor of love and it's such an obsession. But to be with somebody who doesn't think that and is as equally obsessed, so you're never like upset at each other for like fucking like never being off.
yeah. Well, there's like one final thing that I ask people in addition to all of the different things that you've kind of learnt and mastered over your life so far. If you could like snap your fingers right now and just be an expert in like anything, like it can be a topic or a skill. If you could just know everything about something like right now, like what would you pick?
If I could know everything about something?
Yeah.
Oh God. Does it also give me an ability? Does the knowledge give me an ability?
Sure.
Then I would know everything about like DIY, like fixing things.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Just be able to do anything around the house that gets broken.
Yeah, because I'm just so shit at that. You know?
Me too.
And I need to not be shit at it. So I would like to be handy. Honestly, I'm just not. I'm not handy. I would like to be the guy that, like, in his spare time, makes a dresser for fun.
Yeah. Well, any TV producers, if you're listening, if you want to commission a series where Des Bishop learns how to do DIY, that's generally the way to get you to figure out how to do everything about one topic. So yeah, reach out. We can make this happen.
Not only is it great to be on your pod, but it's also great to be able to catch up.
Yeah, great to see you, man.
Classic comedians can't really get together unless there's a reason.
Des Bishop there, and if there's anyone who knows how to do everything, it's Des Bishop. He has done a lot. He's probably come the closest of anyone I've talked to of doing literally everything, and he's a man that knows how to hold court, which when you do a podcast every week, someone getting in there and just taking charge and going full yap mode, God, it's heaven. Hope you enjoyed that chat with Des. I certainly enjoyed hearing about the situations he's thrown himself into, the challenges that he's set for himself. What a fascinating guy, and something that I would love to do more of, honestly. By which I mean have TV shows made about the things that I'm trying to do. As I mentioned up the top of the show, patreon.com/howtodoeverything. If you like the show, if you like what I do, you want to get a little bit more of it, that is the place to do it. Coming up this Friday, we've got the first of a 2-part episode with Nikki Britton and Danielle Walker. There's heaps of fun stuff on there. Some different vibes to what are on the show, sometimes kind of following on from what's on the show. But if you want to support the show, that is the way to do it. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Get on the socials, give us a follow, send us a message if there's anything you want to say about the show. Get onto your podcast app of choice and give us a nice review. It all helps. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time for more How to Do Everything.